Welcome to another episode of the Boys on the Bench podcast. We are your host. I am DJ Riley, and alongside me is my brother Dalton Riley and lifelong friend Nathan Eastwood. This is episode 3 of our podcast, and in this episode, we are going to be discussing the top 5 picks in this upcoming NFL draft. So we will each say kind of who we think is going to be picked at each spot. All three of us may have different opinions, and we're going to go ahead and discuss it. So Dalton, let's kick us off with number 1.
Yeah, so as we know, Carolina traded up from the Chicago Bears for the number 1 overall pick. With all the speculation going around with the quarterbacks, I think that it's either going to be either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. I do not think that the Panthers will go wrong selecting either quarterback. I believe that both quarterbacks are NFL ready, and they have possess the prowess to be successful in the NFL and to be able to get the job done. In my opinion, though, I believe that it will be Bryce Young. I may be a little biased. I am a huge diehard Alabama fan. Graduated there, too, for all the haters. So I do have that. But
after he went to Texas State.
Hey, still graduated from Alabama, okay? But needless to say, I think that Carolina will still take Bryce Young, number 1 overall, over C.J. Stroud. Like I said, if they do go with C.J. Stroud, I think these quarterbacks are so similar and they're being ready for the NFL that I don't think it'll matter. But
see, I do agree with you, because I do agree that CJ Stroud and Bryce Young are the 2 top quarterbacks in this upcoming draft, but I don't think that they necessarily go with Bryce Young. And the only reason that I say that is if we look at Frank Wright's career, he's never worked with the short quarterback. So if we look, CJ Stroud, I think he is a 6'3" quarterback, and then Bryce Young is only 5'10". And if we look at the quarterbacks that Frank Wright has worked with over his NFL career, and again, only kind of the notable ones that come kind of to my head that who he's worked with. So at 6'4" was Matt Ryan and Andrew Luck. They were both 6'4". The other quarterbacks that were 6'5" were Peyton Manning, Carson Wentz, and Phillip Rivers. So obviously those quarterbacks, we all recognize those names. Those are pretty notable quarterbacks. He has had the most success working with taller quarterbacks. Now, I know that someone has kind of called him out about some of this stuff. And he also said, whenever like he was drafting Russell Wilson, or in Russell Wilson's draft, he was just like, well, I also really liked Russell Wilson, but we didn't select him. And we all know Russell Wilson doesn't have the height aspect to his game, right? So, but he didn't pick him. So I do think that if he had a preference, and I do think that CJ Stroud and Bryce Young are very similar levels of athletic ability. So I do think that coming in, if he had to have a preference, I think that he's obviously going to go with CJ Stroud at the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to go ahead and agree with the both of y'all here. I think Carolina has to take a quarterback here at number 1. My opinion, I'm going CJ Stroud if I'm the Carolina Panthers. I think if you go back and you watch the playoff game he had in college, everybody was like, oh, Ohio State doesn't deserve a chance. They don't deserve to get in. They don't deserve this. And he went in there and they almost beat Georgia. It was almost a TCU Ohio State national championship game. And the way that CJ Stroud handled that game and the way he performed in that game, he just looks to me more pro ready. I think he will fit, like you said, the height wise, he'll fit Frank Wright system a little bit better than Bryce Young would. And I just think that with Frank Wright, coming into Carolina, you need to get the guy who you feel like is most pro ready, because like you got to win some football games. And he's a new head coach, or not new to Carolina, I should say, and he's getting in a guy who's going to be their franchise guy, and you got to build around him. And I think that is CJ Stroud. So I think that Frank Wright is going to draft him and build around him and coach him up and get him even more pro ready than he already is, and just let him learn the system in and out. And I think he'll be pretty good quarterback for the Panthers. And if I'm there, I'm taking CJ Stroud at 1.
Look, I agree that bigger frame quarterbacks have been a staple for Frank Reich. But according to Rhett Lewis, a host with NFL Network, I'm sure we all know him, when talking with Frank Reich, he characterized what he was looking for in a quarterback was a playmaker. And I think that could very possibly be Bryce Young. I don't think that necessarily means that he's looking for height or a big frame quarterback. I think you're right, DJ. I think that's exactly who he's used to. But I think in what he's been saying and what reports are out there, especially with what Rhett Lewis was referring to, being a playmaker, according to Bleacher Report's NFL scouting department, when outside the pocket, Bryce Young blends athleticism, creativity, and flexible mechanics, which creates magic. So I think that right there, from based on their scouting department, and there's other scouting reports out there as well that just show that type of athleticism that Bryce Young has and his ability to create. And I think that is exactly what Carolina needs. I know it's not that type of quarterback that Frank Reich might be used to, but I think it's something that he's willing to branch out to. When it comes to athleticism, he's smaller, twitchy, very elusive. CJ Stroud is mobile too, but I just don't think he's as dynamic in the pocket as Bryce Young is and able to get out and make those plays. Now, when it comes to arm strength, CJ Stroud has that all day. I think that's also due to his height, but
I was going to say that I think CJ Stroud is a better pocket passer. I think he flows better in the pocket. I think he moves around better in the pocket. I think his pocket awareness is better than Bryce Young, and he throws a lot. He throws a way better ball than Bryce Young, in my opinion. And I think that that's what Frank Wright wants. So I really think that that's who he's going to go with just because of that. I think CJ Stroud's pocket presence and the way he throws the ball down the field is what's going to get him drafted number one.
And one thing I want to add to off of that, Nathan, CJ Stroud was actually, to back you up on that, was actually considered one of the most accurate pocket passers in college football. I think it was 78% or something like that was what it was. But Bryce Young was a close second at like 76, 77 point something percent. So, I mean, he's not far behind CJ Stroud when it comes to accuracy. Like I'm saying, I think that Bryce Young is more of a playmaker in creating plays that aren't there than CJ Stroud is. And I think that's what Frank Reich was referring to. But if they take CJ Stroud, I'm not opposed to it. But I can see, I have in my gut feeling, I'm feeling Bryce Young.
Yeah, and I think, again, like you said, it definitely comes with a little bit of a bias. We all want to see our favorite college team have the number one overall pick. And I'm not saying that because of size that Bryce Young isn't a good option. But like I said, he is a top two quarterback, and I do think that him and Bryce Young and then CJ Stroud are very similar. Like at this point, we're having to get nitpicky with it. And it comes down to more so the facilitator of the game. And frankly, I haven't watched enough of either Bama or Ohio State. I know that those were top dog teams, but I haven't watched. They're not in the conference that I watch. I'm a Baylor fan. I'm a Big 12 guy. So I haven't watched too much Big 10 or SEC. I mean, I watch SEC, but not really a whole lot of Bama. But I know that those are two quality quarterbacks. I don't know how they facilitate the game, and I think that that's what it comes down to. But again, if we look at Frank Reich's career, I think that has a ton of value in it as well, just because looking at the numbers and everything else, they are two very similar quarterbacks. Like you have to get real nitpicky with, again, how they are. So I think if we're going to get super nitpicky, looking at Frank Reich's career and the height of the quarterback that he prefers to work with is one of those nitpicky things that we kind of have to look at. And we're talking about a 5'10 quarterback opposed to a 6'3. There have not been a ton of 5'10 quarterbacks in the league, and especially in the league that have showed a ton of success. So, and I know there's always that narrative around Bama and Bama quarterbacks not being able to come into the league and produce. So now he has kind of that stereotype following him out of Alabama, entering the draft, and then also the height aspect to it. So he kind of has cards against him, and I love rooting for an underdog, but realistically, I don't see Carolina picking Bryce Young. I think that they do go CJ Stroud.
And if you're Bryce Young, if I'm Bryce Young, I'm sitting here saying, like, if you don't take me at 1, no big deal. I'd rather go to Houston anyway. I'll get into that when we talk about Houston, but I just got some topics there that I think Bryce Young would be a better fit in Houston, in my opinion.
Okay, so our picks, to go back over this before we jump into pick number 2, DJ, said that pick number 1 was CJ Stroud. I don't know about y'all, but after this, whenever we go back to the draft, I'm curious as to how close we're actually going to be. So DJ said CJ Stroud. Nathan said CJ Stroud. Dalton, Bama fan himself, Bryce Young. So anyways, let's go ahead, jump into pick number 2. Pick number 2 is currently held by the Houston Texans. Nathan, go ahead, kick us off. What you got there?
So this is where I'm going to go Bryce Young and Dalton. I'm not saying that Bryce Young's not going 1 because he played for Alabama, and you know me, I'm not a big Bama rooter. So I think Bryce Young would rather play for the Texans, and here's why. We didn't mention when we talked about the dying organization that they have over there that this offseason they did just sign Dalton Schultz. They got Noah Brown. And not to mention, they drafted John Mechie last year, who sat out because he had cancer, and now he's back in training and going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready to go. They're saying that he's probably going to play by week 1, and that right there is a wide receiver that Bryce Young has a connection with already in John Mechie. So if I'm Bryce Young and I'm sitting in the draft room, I'm okay with going to Houston because I already have a connection with someone who's there. And I just think that getting Young is the best move that they can do and add. And I just think that just him being there and then, getting Schultz and all them, it's just going to be an easier moving in to getting ready to play. You don't have to build as much as the offensive side of the ball there. And because of the weapons he has. I mean, they're not great, but they're not terrible either. So I think the Texans sit here. I think that they hope that the Panthers go Stroud so they can get Bryce Young, and he has that connection already with Mechie. So I think that's why the Texans go Bryce Young, and I think it's a good fit for him. I think it'll work out.
Yeah, no, Nathan, I totally agree with you when it comes to drafting a quarterback. And if you listen to what I said with my first pick, obviously you'll know that obviously I'm going to choose CJ Stroud for this one. I think 2 quarterbacks are going back to back. Either way it goes, quarterback. It's going to happen. I believe Houston will want their franchise quarterback, and I don't think they're going to wait for it. I think they're going to go right now, right away. I know they also have a 12th pick, so I think they're going to go ahead and use that pick right away to get that quarterback. They're not going to wait. However, I think they nab CJ Stroud here and they pick up their wide receiver with that 12th pick. So I can see Houston reuniting, like Nathan was kind of referring to, with John Mechie and Bryce Young. I think it could go the same way with CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I think that'll be a good matchup there. I think reuniting that group there, I think that will be exciting for the fan base. And I think that's something that we've obviously seen work with the Dolphins and the Bengals, with Tua and Waddle in Miami and Burrow and Chase in Cincinnati. So obviously it just shows that when you bring a young quarterback in, I think it kind of adds that cherry to the top, kind of something sweet, that they already have chemistry, and it shows like, hey, we want you to come in and succeed. We have something that's chemistry there. And I think that that's something that I can definitely see working with the Houston Texans. And that's kind of why I also went Bryce Young first as well. Was because that's something I'd also like to see with CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I just think like as a personnel standpoint, he fits better in Houston.
So Dalton, are you saying that Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be their 12th? Obviously, if he's there, he's going to be their 12th overall selection for the NFL draft, because that's Houston. So Houston currently holds 2 and 12.
Hot take.
2 and 12. Is that what I'm saying? Is like that's what you're like? That's the chemistry aspect that you're hoping for.
So obviously we know how good of a wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba is. We also have to realize that he didn't play a year of football last year, right? After an injury, he was out most of the year, right? So we know that could also play that could hurt his stock a little bit. But I don't think it's going to drop him outside the first. I don't think it drops him really. I think he can go in the top 10, and I think teams will take him. But I think if he's there at 12, which I highly think he will be, I think Houston will take him.
I don't think it hurts his stock that much, though, because didn't Jamar Chase sit out his last year at LSU?
But we all know when you sit out a year from injury, there's question marks, right? It's not that it may hurt the stock entirely, but there's question marks.
See, I mean, like it could, but I do think that, you know, he is going to be, for me, I think that there's more potential for him to potentially get scooped up before that 12th overall pick, because some of the teams in there, Detroit obviously needs a little bit of help at receiver. Las Vegas Raiders, like they have Devontae Adams, but outside of that, not a whole lot.
Right? You better put some respect on Hunter Renfrow, sir.
No, I mean but he's a good slot. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba is too, but they definitely need more help at wide receiver. So that's something that I could see Las Vegas doing. And then there's other teams as well that need help. So with Jackson Smith-Njigba being the level of talent that he is, even coming off an injury, I really don't think that he makes it to 12. I think that we see the first wide receiver go off the board. Now, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the first wide receiver off the board, but I think that there is a high possibility that he does come off. But for me, I really don't think that the Texans go quarterback here. So like we've been saying, the Texans have the 2 and the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft, the first round, but they also have 5 total picks in the top 75. So they have the 2 first-round picks, they have 1 second-round pick, and then 2 third-round picks. All of those picks combined fall within the top 75 total picks within the NFL draft. So with DeMeco Ryans coming in as the head coach, they have Davis Mills. I'm not saying that Davis Mills is your franchise quarterback, but you're also not this team through this draft. Although you have 5 picks, you are not going to make this a playoff ready team. So I don't know if you necessarily get your quarterback here. Yes, we just saw CJ Stroud go. Bryce Young, he is equal talent, right, at the quarterback position. I think that they go more on the defensive side. So I have their top needs as a quarterback, but also a edge rusher. So I think that that's kind of something that they look to do here, is add a solid piece to the defensive side for them. So, and the only reason that I say that I think that the reason that they go a defensive guy here is because if we look at the picks in between 2 and 12, they're 2 first-round picks. It's not really quarterback heavy. I don't know if teams are really going to go quarterback, but there's also the potential for trade. Other teams that are further back that could potentially, like a Tampa Bay at number 19, that could trade up to get their guy now with Tom Brady out. So there is always that possibility that another team trades up, but I think that with the way that the current draft is laid out, I do not think that Texans go quarterback at number 2.
And if they don't, the city of Houston, stick to baseball. That's your only hope.
Kind of off what Nathan said, I think that having a defensive coach, I agree with DJ that they could go defense.
It's a possibility, but from a fan base standpoint,
yes,
that fan base would erupt if they didn't get either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud.
And
in my opinion,
they're in dire need of a franchise quarterback. You can't build a new team without that quarterback foundational piece. I think that what they have in Mills, I think that he's a great quarterback. I think he's fantastic, but I think he's just a plug and play until
great.
He's kind of like,
are we watching the same quarterback?
What I'm saying is I think he's kind of just a Band-Aid on a wound, but they need something more in order to heal that, right?
Yeah, I mean they're definitely a dumpster fire of an organization. Davis Mills, I don't think, is the answer long term, and I'm not saying force that issue as long as you can.
That man ain't even good enough to be a backup in the NFL.
He also doesn't have a lot of help.
I mean, he's not bad. He doesn't, and that's what I'm saying. He doesn't. His best wide receiver was Brandon Cooks, and then outside of that is like, okay, who else are we looking at, right? So if you look at the top 4 quarterbacks in this NFL draft, I think there are 4 solid options, and we've discussed 2 of them, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. There is also Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, right? We have 4 quality quarterbacks. So like I was saying, to my point, if we look at the teams in between 2 and 12, so numbers 3 through 11, currently where they stand, there's not a whole lot of teams that I think are going to go quarterback. Arizona at number 3, no. Indianapolis, absolutely. I think that they go quarterback 4, absolutely. So one of the 3 options, right? I'm saying CJ Stroud is going at 1. So either Bryce Young, Will Levis, or Anthony Richardson, most likely going to Indianapolis. Seattle, no. It looks like they're kind of locked in with Geno Smith, I think, unless they get a quarterback that they really like. So I'm saying no there. Detroit, I'm saying no there, honestly.
Oh, no. Jared Goff bought him another year.
I was about to say, I don't think that they go quarterback there. Las Vegas, no. We just saw them commit to Jimmy G. Atlanta, no.
So,
I mean, maybe with Atlanta, we just saw them come out and commit to Desmond Ridder. Chicago, absolutely not. Philadelphia,
so DJ, let me ask you
absolutely
this.
not.
So do you think that do you think they're not going to choose a quarterback right now, Houston, because either they're not ready for him yet, or do you think they really need that defensive piece more?
I think that they need help. They're a dumpster fire. They need help on both sides of the ball. And I think that with you needing help on both sides of the ball, I take my odds. So and that's where I was getting at. With this pick, I think that they go Will Anderson out of Alabama. He is a game wrecker. He is an absolute game wrecker.
Could y'all imagine Alabama
side.
1 and 2? Oh, it's my dream.
Shut up. Yeah, you should be behind me on this. But anyways, I think that they go Will Anderson at number 2, right? Because like I said, all of those teams 3 through 11, you have a very small possibility that they go with their next quarterback. They could, but then it's like they risk the potential of just having to sit them, which I always think is a solid option, but not every team does that. Typically, if you have a top 5 pick, you're going to go quarterback, and they're going to be starting for you day 1.
Let me ask you.
That's what Frank Wright even said.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So, if you're sitting here and you're telling us and all of our listeners that the Texans go Will Anderson at 2, if that's a high possibility, do you think the Colts potentially tried to trade up to 2 to get Bryce Young? Or because I say that because when Patrick Mahomes was drafted, nobody was having him go in the first round. And in comes Andy Reid, trades up to the 10th overall pick and drafts Patrick Mahomes and shocks the nation.
I mean, I think that potential does happen, but I don't know if Houston necessarily makes that trade with Indianapolis because Arizona is at number 3. If they are looking to add a defensive piece and you are the first team at a defensive option, assuming that they go quarterback at number 1, I don't know why you don't take that. I mean, I know you'll get more assets moving back 2 spots into the draft, but then you're kind of settling for maybe someone else, which I mean could happen. But if I am Houston, I get my guy that I believe the most in, and so far for me, that is Will Anderson. So I think that's who they go because there's no way Will Anderson lasts. I think that Arizona, and like I said, we're gonna jump into Arizona here in this next.
Boy, they'd be fucking pissed, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, Arizona though is gonna go. They're gonna go defense. They're gonna go an edge rusher. I don't see why they wouldn't. Losing J.J. Watt, I don't see why they wouldn't go with another edge rusher. And there's 2 really good ones, right? The guy out of Texas Tech, what's his name again? Tyree Wilson. So Tyree
and
Wilson
you also got the guy out of K-State too. I can't pronounce his last name. It's like Nduzuma or some shit like that. I don't know. I forget his last name.
Yeah. Or then there's a guy out of Iowa too.
Yeah. That's
he's kind of
yeah. He's like Vinoise or Vines or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. No, Van Ness. Yeah. He's a dude. So anyways, that's what I'm saying. There's good options, but I do think that Will Anderson is the option. So if they were going to make a trade from 2 to 4, they've got to know that they're probably going to lose the opportunity on Will Anderson. So for me, I go ahead, take Will Anderson at 2. We have 4 more picks. 4 more picks in the top 75. If you are dead set on a quarterback, trade back up. If you see 2 of them go pretty quickly and your predictions were wrong that these next couple of teams aren't going to go quarterback and they do, find a way to trade back up. You have 4 more picks in the top 75.
I feel like
could you imagine the Texans walking away with Will Anderson and Bryce Young?
Oh, Bryce Young
or
won't
Anthony
fall. Bryce
Richardson?
Young won't fall to 12. Anthony Richardson won't make it past top 4.
Yeah.
No. I'm saying trade up. Trade
Oh,
up. Trade
okay,
up.
yeah.
If they trade up and that's what they walk out of the first round.
You're going to have to trade up, but not to mention, like, there's a possibility that if the Texans pass on a quarterback, like you said, there's going to be a team that's slower in the draft. It's going to be like, hold up, we can trade up now and go get that said so quarterback that they like. You know what I mean? So I think if you're Houston, like you open, if it's not a bad idea to go defense. In my opinion, though, I'd go Bryce Young. But Houston, you open up the gate for teams at the bottom of the first round to trade up. If you do that, that's like Houston needs to know that.
I think it's very possible that they do go on the defensive side of this ball, and if they do, it will definitely be Will Anderson. But I think that it's definitely going to be CJ Stroud. I think, like Nathan said, it's got to be a quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I think it has to be one of those two. They need their guy. They need the franchise guy. But, is it the right time? We don't know. Just like in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer and what he did to that poor guy there, Trevor Lawrence. Sometimes you're just not ready for that quarterback, but sometimes you make the moves necessary. You can see great things happening over there right now with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. So I don't know. I think sometimes if it's the right guy and you need him, you'll get him. So
see, I get risky with the pick. I go Will Anderson, like I said, because of the same exact reasons. Nobody else is most likely going to pick a quarterback. And if they do, find a way to trade back up, because there's no way I think Will Anderson makes it to 12. There's no way I think Jalen Carter makes it to 12. There's no way Tyree Wilson makes it to 12.
I wouldn't draft Jalen Carter.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I know that there's question marks around him and the character issues and everything else, but we also see him not taking visits from teams outside of the top 10.
Bold. I mean,
he's a dumbass. He's a dumbass.
I think that just shows character on him too. It doesn't really put a real good light on him. I think that's kind of that cocky swagger that'd be like, no, I'm not going outside the top 10. I'm only going to meet with teams in the top 10. Dude, what if somebody in the 11 or 12 move up, man? Like,
exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. What if someone were to trade up? You need to meet with everybody. It's a bold move, and I don't understand this. I don't understand the statement piece.
Yeah, what are you saying
by that? But I don't want to attack his character because I don't know too much. I don't know too much about him, so I don't want to sit here and defame him any more than I'm sure
we don't want
to
to defame
already
him, but
is.
He has to see from an outside looking in, from our perspective, what we're seeing, and that's possibly what scouts are seeing.
The human factor. That's the human factor.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it is also, though, like I was saying, it's a real possibility that he is selected inside of the top 10. Like, he is a generational talent. And we see where these people who have question marks around their character, they go top 10 all the time. They hope that them getting selected in the draft changes it. And for some people, it really does change their character. So that's the hope. So I do think that there is a real possibility that he doesn't make it to that 12th overall pick. And then, like I was saying, same with Tyree Wilson. So then now what do? You have a franchise quarterback, and then you're at number 12. Not that at the number 12 pick you're having to settle for somebody, but I think that I take my odds. I go with Will Anderson, and then if I'm really starting to see, because I think if you go with one of those 4 quarterbacks that we mentioned, you can't go wrong. I think that one of those 4 quarterbacks are worth building around. So if 3 go off the board, you need to start finding your way to trade back up. You have 4 more picks in the top 75. But someone else that I see adding.
Hold on. Well, so what are our picks? What are our picks for pick total for everyone?
Oh, yes. So far, I'll have y'all go over y'all's. So for me, DJ, I have a number 1 at CJ Stroud. Number 2, Will Anderson.
So with number 1
Texans.
for Dalton, I'm going with Bryce Young, and for number 2 with Houston, I'm going with CJ Stroud.
And Nathan over here, I got C.J. Stroud at 1, Bryce Young 2.
Okay. So with me going Will Anderson, an edge rusher for the number 2 overall pick. And as I said earlier, Arizona currently holds the number 3. I think that they hold this. I think, like I said, J.J. Watt announced his retirement at the end of last season. So they are needing to add depth there. Cardinals looked horrible last year. Absolutely horrible. So I do think that they add a generational talent for their defensive on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that with this pick, I have their number 1 need as an edge rusher, like I've been saying. So with my pick as Will Anderson already being off the board, I think that they go Tyree Wilson. I know that some people are saying maybe Jalen Carter here. I don't think that he goes. I think, again, with the question marks around his character and everything else, he also does not play the edge rusher position, which J.J. Watt was. He's not. Jalen Carter is an interior defender, not an edge rusher. So the next best edge rusher to me is Tyree Wilson. So I think that that's kind of something that they go here is getting that replacement for JJ Watt, a young dude. Tyree Wilson is explosive. I hated watching him. I think he led the Big 12 in pressures, not sacks, but he led in pressures, which pressures are a very good statistic to look at. And honestly, I think it's a better statistic to look at other than sacks, because sacks can sometimes get skewed on who got it, or not necessarily who got it, but that a sack doesn't necessarily mean that you initialize the pressure and finish the play, right? Sacks can sometimes just fall in your lap, however, right? So I think that the pressure side of it, Tyree Wilson led the Big 12 in pressures. So I think that he is the next best option here for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, so for me, I agree with DJ. I think it's definitely going to be a defensive player, also on the defensive end side. So for me, it's going to be Will Anderson 100%. I feel that this is the most confident choice here for the Arizona Cardinals. Will Anderson will be an immediate impact player for this team as soon as he hits the field. I don't think he's going to be as big bodied as like Von Miller or Myles Garrett, but he is incredibly strong and has the functional strength. So I think he's very good with his hands, great footwork, great speed off the end. I think actually someone who he actually reminds me of, who was drafted last year by the Lions, is Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson is also a very big, tall player, but very linky, very long. I think that Will Anderson's have his very similar style of play as Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's exactly what the Arizona Cardinals are going to get. Someone very similar to that. Not very big, not going to be very broad, but going to be very linky and fast. I think he knows how to get off blocks and knows how to make big plays and get to the quarterback. So I think that's somebody that's going to be very good for them. So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with both y'all. Defensive side of the ball here. I'm with you, Dalton. I think it's going to be Will Anderson. I'm not going to cover a whole lot on why I think it's going to be Will Anderson, because Dalton covered most of it. And if you watched any Alabama game, you know that dude is an absolute freaking stud. So to me, it just makes sense. Get the best pass rusher on the draft board, and that's the Cardinals taking Will Anderson at 3.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he's probably the most well-rounded defensive player in this draft. I know DJ took him first as the first defensive player, so I'm pretty sure we can all pretty much agree on this. He's pretty much all of our first defensive player off the board, so I believe that he will be. But his competitiveness and his drive, I think that's going to be highly desired for Jonathan Gannon's defense there in Arizona, and I think that's going to be a great piece to build around.
Yeah, no, and I know that we've all kind of been in agreement with them going defensive side of the ball, and number 4 is currently the Colts. But before we get into them, I mean, kind of segueing into them a little bit, but I saw this one report where the Colts it was a rumor, but it was saying that they were considering trading up to 3, and then so they go up one spot, Arizona slides back a spot, and it's just like I don't understand the trade, because I think that they would end up giving up a 3rd and a 4th. They wouldn't give up a whole lot, but they would give up a 3rd and a 4th as well as just move back a spot.
Unless they got
Which, I mean-
DeAndre Hopkins.
I mean, throw that in there. That would be
That's
that would be
unless
I
they
mean, that
get
would be
DeAndre. If they
interesting.
get DeAndre Hopkins, why wouldn't you?
Well, no, I mean I mean, if I'm Arizona though, there's the Colts came to me with that offer. There's no way there's no way I don't take it, because we know that the Colts are most likely, in my opinion, I think the Colts most likely are going with a quarterback. I don't think that they go anything else here. I think it would be dumb for them not to go quarterback. That's the biggest glaring hole that they have. I know we can say the same thing about the Houston Texans, but like again, their total organization is just needs to be rebuilt.
I mean, you get
But-
rid of D Hop. I mean, you fall back one spot, still get the guy you want, and you
Yeah.
pick up 2, maybe 3 more picks out of it. I mean, it's already been talked that they're trying to get rid of him anyway. So if you can get,
But why would my thing is like, why would the Colts even offer
Well, because
that, though?
why
Because
wouldn't
you?
you?
You know that Arizona. Well, you know that. I mean, I guess the only thing that I could see.
Why wouldn't you? Jonathan
is-
Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., DeAndre Hopkins,
No,
and
no,
then if they did were to trade up and Houston did go defense, now you have Bryce Young.
Well, yeah.
If it
What were
were
you gonna say, Dalton?
if it were to fall out like
Are
that,
we talking about Indianapolis trading up to the 3rd?
Yeah, well, I'm just confused because like it seemed like it was a pretty serious rumor that Indianapolis would consider trading
yeah.
up to number 3, and I think that they would trade up to number 3 if it went quarterback, and then I think they'd say absolutely not trade up to 3. But I'm just confused on why they would do that if they know that Arizona's.
Well,
gonna
that's
go
no.
defense.
The reason why I think they would trade up to 3, because I thought the same thing as you did, so I kind of looked into it. If they go quarterback, the reason they would go up to 3 is because they fear that somebody who's quarterback hungry as well will trade up to 3 before they will. So if Arizona, they know Arizona's going to take a defense, and they know that there's more quarterback hungry teams out there, and they can slide back, and they may not get Will Anderson, but they slide back enough to still get Tyree Wilson. They'll slide back, get those picks, but they'll also still get their defensive guy. Indianapolis just fears that they may lose that 3rd pick to another quarterback hungry team, and 3 quarterbacks are off the board, and now they're left with the 4th best pick.
Yeah, I get that, I guess. Because, I mean, I was curious. I was like, I mean, we know Arizona's going defense, but yeah, I think trading up, like you're saying. But, man, I just, like I said, like we went earlier through the list, I just don't see any of those teams, trading up to, I mean, getting a quarterback necessarily. I mean, they would be risky, but you would also be giving up quite a bit of assets. Like, I think Tampa Bay to move up from 19 to 3.
trade Vita
They've
Vea.
got to. I mean, I don't know if they give away a veteran player. I think that, when we
For
see
your
draft day
franchise guy?
trades, I mean, it's just not a common theme. We don't see a lot of like veteran players on the move. Typically, when we see draft day picks,
Tennessee got rid of AJ
traded,
Brown.
it's for other. Yeah, that's true. That's also true. I mean, I guess it maybe in recent history it's been a little bit more common. I don't think that they give up Vita Vea though. I think that minimum they have to give up obviously the 19th overall pick, but then also the next year's first round pick, and then additional picks on top of that. So Tampa Bay would have to give up quite a bit. Now, is it worth it? Potentially, but it's how much do they value? Because I think that, like we're saying, the top 2 quarterbacks are CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. So assuming that those are the first 2 overall picks, not that those were mine, but if we're saying it went quarterback, and now we're, saying that there's potential for a trade, now you're looking at Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. So how much is Tampa Bay sold on Anthony Richardson and Will Levis? Those aren't the 2 best quarterbacks in my opinion in the draft.
Here's something that I don't think most people are talking about, and here's something that I'll bet $100 on for $1,500 profit. I think that Mel Kiper actually was talking about this, and while we were talking, I went back and found it. He actually has the Titans trading up from the number 11 pick to the number 3 overall to select quarterback Anthony Richardson. He has the Titans trading their number 11 and 41 to Arizona this year, as well as their first round pick in 2024 and either a first or second round pick in 2025. If that happened, I can very well see that happening. I was actually going to make Anthony Richardson to the Titans one of my picks, but I just felt like that's just kind of far-fetched, but I don't think it's that far-fetched as we think. I think that I think the Titans
I
can
think-
do that, and they can get their guy Anthony Richardson because they need a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Titans do go quarterback for sure because I did see this report with the Titans. I think 60% of their cap is taking up between two players. Those two players are Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, who I think is 30 or close to 30, right? So we know that he's potentially on his way out. So anyways, with me saying that, I do think that Tennessee has a potential to go quarterback because I don't know if Ryan Tannehill is going to be there after this year. I think that they decide to move on from him. So why not bring in a young quarterback and give him the opportunity to sit a year, learn the game a little bit, and then he can jump in. So I think that's a realistic trade-off.
The only reason I bring that up, though, is just because that's things that are probably making Indy a little skeptical and probably a little nervous, and that's why I can see them trading up to 3, having Will Anderson drop to the pick number 4 with Arizona, swapping with them or further. But I can see why Indy would be a little nervous with what's going on behind them.
All right. Well, speaking of Indy, Dalton, who do you have Indy taken at 4?
Well, hold up before we get into Indy, let's go back over our 3 picks. I'll start it off. So for DJ, I had CJ Stroud, number 1 to Carolina. Number 2, the Houston Texans. I have them selecting Will Anderson. Number 3, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech.
And for Dalton, I have Carolina selecting Bryce Young with the number 1 overall pick. I have Houston selecting CJ Young with the number 2. And then I have Arizona selecting Will Anderson with the number 3.
Bryce Young. He meant Bryce Young. Go ahead, Dalton. Go back 3 years. You said CJ Young.
So for Dalton, I have Carolina selecting Bryce Young with the number 1 overall pick. And then I have Houston taking CJ Stroud with the number 2. And then I have Arizona taking Will Anderson with the number 3.
And Nathan, I got CJ Stroud going number 1 overall to the Panthers. Bryce Young going at number 2 to the Texans. Will Anderson, number 3, going to the Cardinals.
All right. Nathan, who you got for number 4 to the Indianapolis, currently held by the Indianapolis Colts?
Anthony Richardson, hands down, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Why
are you so confident on this,
dude? Okay, look at that man. That dude, out of all the quarterbacks, probably had one of the best pro days. He's kind of built like Cam Newton, and the Colts, like I mentioned this in the past couple episodes, the Colts have gotten their best quarterbacks from drafting them. So if you're sitting there with Jim Irsay and you're the general manager and you're sitting there and you're in the draft room and you're thinking about what do we need to win now? You need a franchise quarterback because you haven't had luck getting quarterback out of free agency signings. You haven't. You've gotten Carson Wentz, bust. Phillip Rivers, bust. Matt Ryan, bust. So now you've tried 3 times and struck out 3 times. So now you have to draft, do what's done you good. Draft your guy. And I think that guy is Anthony Richardson. I honestly think that the Colts are happy to have him because that man throws a deep ball extremely well. I don't know if y'all saw his pro day, or not his pro day, but the combine.
I didn't watch much of his combine. I did watch his pro day at Florida, though.
Yeah, his combine, that man looked like he was just doing a Sunday morning toss with his son in the backyard, but he's slinging that thing 70 yards. Throws the deep ball extremely well. He gives off some confidence. And I think that's what the Colts need. And, you have Michael Pittman Jr., you got Jonathan Taylor, you got arguably one of the best offensive line in the league, and you just lack quarterback play. And I think that they go Anthony Richardson here because, like I said, they've gotten their best quarterbacks by drafting them, and stick to your guns. Draft Anthony Richardson at 4.
Look, yeah, we flirted with this possibility in our last episode of this podcast of Anthony Richardson going to the Indianapolis Colts. I love talking about that so much. I was like, this has to happen, right? I was like, he's definitely going to the Indianapolis Colts. Let's just take a minute to talk about what he did at the combine that we were talking about it. So let's not forget that this man is one of the taller quarterbacks coming into the draft. He comes in at 6'4" and 244 pounds. He ran the 40-yard dash. Yeah,
That's a unit.
For those of y'all that don't know how big that is, that's a fucking middle linebacker playing quarterback.
He ran the 40-yard dash in 4.43 seconds. Guys, that is zoom in at that size.
Can you imagine 244 running at you at?
Yeah,
Would you say 4.4?
Dude, I will gladly.
No, thank you.
I will
That's why
gladly
I'm on the
step
bench.
out of the way. So, guys, I mean, just his athletic ability was just it was freakish. I mean, the dude is just absolutely dominant. So obviously we didn't see much of that dominance with Florida, but we know he has the capabilities to be absolutely dominant. We also know that you don't have to be dominant in college football to be dominant in the NFL. I'm on the up and up for this quarterback. Let's see. So I absolutely love the idea of him going there, especially being behind and being in the backfield with Jonathan Taylor. I think having a 4.4 speed. I mean, Jonathan Taylor himself is already fast enough to just zoom past secondary defenders. So I think also having two type of these guys that are just as fast as each other, I think that it's going to be a nightmare for defenses to just kind of match up and kind of play against these guys and figure out how you're going to be able to defend them. I think it's going to be absolutely a nightmare.
Sorry to cut you off here, DJ. I know you're next, but like now that I have time to think about it, when you're talking, this is just a Lamar Jackson on steroids. If you think about it, with a better deep ball. That's what he is.
He could throw it.
I mean,
he can chunk it.
He got the Lamar Jackson speed, but built like Clay Matthews.
Dude, this guy could arguably be the best quarterback in this draft. Arguably, he could be the best quarterback.
He slept on. Yeah, he slept on. He slept on.
And like for me, so I know that both of y'all have just said that your picks for the Indianapolis Colts are Anthony Richardson, and I am going to be the third person to say that it is also going to be Anthony Richardson. But if you look at my draft board, so I just did want to point this back out. So we had C.J. Stroud. Then we had Will Anderson, and then I had Tyree Wilson. So that means that at number 4, the Colts, with still what I have, the Colts still have Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson on the table. I think that they still go Anthony Richardson over Bryce Young. I think, again, Bryce Young, maybe if you're like, they just played two different style games for me. I think Bryce Young is a little bit more of a pocket passer, where Anthony Richardson, he can pass within the pocket, but he can also extend plays. And I think it's like y'all are saying, like, he is a very slept on quarterback. He has a lot of different abilities that just are tucked away. He's very quick. He's built like a brick house. Okay. So I think that they do go quarterback. I do think that it is Anthony Richardson in this case. Now, offensive line wise, that has always been a rock for the Indianapolis Colts, especially in past seasons. This last season, though, absolutely not. They ranked near the bottom. I know that they were a little bit injury-ridden. I think Quentin Nelson sat out a little bit of time. Maybe one of their other tackles sat out a little bit of time. So I know that impacts it, and hopefully we have a
just an all-around bad year.
Back.
Just an all-around bad year.
Yeah, confidence is all out of the building. They go through a coaching change. Like it's a lot, but I do think that they are going to have to add pieces on the O-line side of the ball as well. But I do have, like I said, I think quarterback is their top need. That's what they go with. And I think it is going to be Anthony Richardson in this case. Now, with that pick, like we're saying, with him being a very similar quarterback to Lamar Jackson, I think that we start to see the Colts run a Baltimore-style offense, a run-first offense. Like Dalton said, to your point, with Jonathan Taylor, that offense, I don't want to dream of it. Like that's a nightmare for other teams, and that's what I'm saying. Because
watch out,
yeah. Anthony Richardson at quarterback, Jonathan Taylor at running back, and if this O-line gets healthy and shows the potential that they have in previous years, gracious.
If they get their crap
together,
this offense is going to be a unit, and they're going to be one of the best offenses that we'll all be talking about this next season.
Let me ask y'all this though: if you go Anthony Richardson at 4, does Anthony Richardson win Rookie of the Year?
Potentially,
And-
because
and the
think
Colts
he has the
offense.
highest ceiling of all the quarterbacks. I think he could.
I agree. I agree. If Anthony Richardson falls to the Colts, Anthony Richardson look at his chops, because that is, out of all the teams getting a quarterback, that is the team that is set
And
up
he also
most for
don't forget
success
he
right
has
now.
young studs at wide receivers. The dude
Yeah,
the dude has a
that
growing
team.
wide receivers over there. I mean, Michael Pittman as your wide receiver 1.
If-
I mean, dude, these guys are young and they're ready, they're hungry, and I think this is going to be a team.
You heard it here first on Boys on the Bench podcast. If the Colts draft Anthony Richardson and he is day one starter, he will win Rookie of the Year.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, he wins Rookie of the Year, because if we look at the AFC South, and I know that record goes a lot into kind of those awards, is like, especially with MVP, we look at the record. They're not going to give an MVP to a guy that had the best stats, but then also led their team to a 3-14, 3 and whatever record, right? Doesn't matter. That's not how it's going to work. Okay. So if we look at the AFC South, the other teams within that division, it is the Colts, the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Titans. Those are not really good teams. We saw the
They're all-
Jaguars win that division, I think, at
They're
9 and
all
9 and eight
rebuilding.
last year.
All
Jag-
4 of those
the-
teams are rebuilding.
Yeah.
Whoa. The Jags are going to be a pretty
No,
solid
they-
football
absolutely.
team. Let's just,
No, and I think that they are, but I think that the Colts are going to be able to compete, and that's what I'm saying. They're going to be able to
yeah.
compete with Anthony Richardson. Like,
well,
it's
yeah,
not a highly
not
competitive
just in that division though, not in just that, like in all the NFL, because that team is set up for success. You just lack a quarterback.
Well, offensive line too. But yeah, so if they get that offensive line together,
Well,
you're right.
But only last year, though. But that same offensive line the year before that was one of arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. But like DJ said, when you're having a down year, your confidence is shaken. You're just ready for the year to get over. You're trying to make it through healthy. You live to fight
Right,
another
but
day.
you just got to have that foundation. I think if you don't have an offensive line, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is or your running back. I think they're going to play some pretty crappy football too. So I think, yes, I agree. I think quarterback over offensive line, I think that's the biggest need right now. Obviously, they need that piece. But if they get that offensive line together, I think we can all agree that this team is going to be right where it needs to be on the offensive side of the ball.
I think that this is
Yep.
because we know that in previous years, we all felt like the Colts were a quarterback away. We thought Phillip Rivers was going to come in and lead them down this long run. I mean, I didn't really think that, but there was still that potential there because of the success he had showed with the Chargers. So brought Phillip Rivers in, failed. Brought Matt Ryan in. We thought he was going to do great things because all of the success he showed with the Falcons, failed. So this whole time, they still have a very young squad, and they're still a quarterback away. So I think Anthony Richardson coming in, I think that, it changes that style of offense for them. And I think it's going to look very similar to Baltimore, and they are going to show a ton of success. So
No, I was going to say, now
go
the
ahead.
only other thing that I would think that they need to add the offensive ball to be a complete unit is they probably do need to add another wide receiver, I think is what they could use. They do have Alec Pearson, and they just added Isaiah McKenzie. I think those guys are great. I just don't think they complement Michael Pittman very well. I think they could use another piece out there that could add to that wide receiver core that could take them that extra step with Anthony Richardson. But that's something I think they could add to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think building around him would kind of be the next move. I know that they have needs defensively as well. Like Rocky Sin has not really had a great NFL career at cornerback. They just moved on from Stephon Gilmore to the Cowboys, so they have glaring holes on the defensive side as well. So I do see them going that. But let's go ahead, jump into pick number 5. But before we do that, we will go through our overview. So for DJ, again, at number 1, I have Carolina taking CJ Stroud. Number 2, I have Houston taking Will Anderson. 3, Arizona will be taking Tyree Wilson. And number 4, Indianapolis will be taking Anthony Richardson.
For Dalton, I have Carolina with number 1 taking Bryce Young. I have Houston with number 2 taking CJ Stroud. I have Arizona with number 3 taking Will Anderson. And then I have Indianapolis with the 4th overall pick taking Anthony Richardson.
And Nathan over here has got CJ Stroud going number 1 overall to the Panthers, Bryce Young 2 going to the Texans. Also have Will Anderson going to the Cardinals and Anthony Richardson going to the Colts at 4. So going into 5, we have the Seahawks. And in my opinion, some people think that this is a quarterback spot. My opinion, I disagree. I think Geno Smith has proved all the haters and the doubters that he belongs. He belongs in Seattle. He made a good run, played good football, and if I'm not mistaken, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he lead the NFL in completion percentage?
I'm honestly not. I'm not quite sure on that, but he had a very good NFL season. He had a very good season last year, so I wouldn't put it past him.
So with all that being said, I think he's bought him another year, maybe another 2. And with that, I think here is where your first offensive lineman goes off the board because of what Geno Smith did last year and proving all the doubters and haters wrong. I think that the Seahawks, the best thing that you can do now is build around Geno Smith, make him even better next year. And I think that you go and you get that offensive tackle out of Northwestern, Peter Skoronski, or however you pronounce his last name. I know it's probably wrong, so don't hate on me. But he's the best offensive lineman on the board. He's got a big frame, big body, broad shoulders, long reach, massive hands, quick feet. Everything you want in offensive lineman. And he has the potential to be a great offensive lineman in this league. And I think the Seahawks are sitting there at 5, and they're going to draft him and help out Geno Smith in the pocket.
No, I think so. For me, I think that would be a solid pick. I think going O lineman there would be very ideal. However, and I do agree with you what you were saying with Geno Smith. However, though, the way that my draft board is played out. So again, going back through it, number 1, CJ Stroud, number 2, Will Anderson, number 3, Tyree Wilson, number 4, Anthony Richardson. That still leaves Bryce Young on the board. Pete Carroll has worked with a short quarterback. And I hate pulling up height into this all the time, but Pete Carroll has worked with a short quarterback in Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is now on his way to Denver. And I think that would be one heck of a story because Seattle has less rad, but Seattle has this pick from Denver. So I think it would be a cool story for them to basically draft Russell Wilson's replacement and future in Bryce Young. Now, with that, if Seattle is dead set, like you're saying, if they are fully committed to Geno Smith, because I do think that he proved himself. He has had a decent NFL career, and then last year,
not only does it help Geno Smith, it helps Kenneth Walker in the run game.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. Like the O-line, that's what I'm saying. The O-line would be a good move. But for the way that my draft board is laid out, I don't know who is going to pick at number 5. But I do think that it is Bryce Young. This may be a spot where we see Tennessee trade up to number 5 for Bryce Young. This may be a spot where we see Houston trade up, Tampa Bay trade up. One of those teams that are a quarterback needy team trade up to number 5. But with the way that my draft board is laid out, Bryce Young is going at number 5. There's no way he makes it past 5. Someone is trading up or Seattle is taking 5, and they're going to say, hey, Bryce Young, okay, we got Geno Smith, who I believe is 30-plus years of age, and you're going to sit behind him for, I think he just signed a 2-year contract. You're going to sit behind him for 2 years, and then you're probably going to take over our organization as QB1.
I'm going to have to agree with both of you. In DJ's case, Bryce Young isn't going past 5. I think that's why he's going number 1. For Nathan's case, I agree that I think they're going to continue to ride with Geno Smith. He just signed a 3-year, $105 million contract. I don't see them going with another quarterback after signing that. I just don't see him riding the bench this year after drafting a rookie quarterback. I mean, they could, yes, but I just don't see them doing that to Geno. I think Geno's proved his position where he's at there. I think he's going to stay right where he is, and I think he's going to continue to play great football. I believe that Seattle has found their guy for the foreseeable future with Geno. But according to Seattle Seahawks team, to their team page, when I was looking around, the general manager John Schneider made it explicitly clear that he was utterly disappointed with their defensive line. And that changes were on the horizon. So I think this is this is the one pick. I think we're all going to have different picks, right? I think this is the first one where we're going to disagree with each other. So with that being said, I see Seattle making a splash on the defensive side of the ball with their first pick. I think they could go with either Jalen Carter to beef up the interior or Tyree Wilson to provide explosiveness to the edge. But in my opinion, I think they picked the safer option, and this is where they go with Tyree Wilson. I think they've been needing a solid play at the end position for years now, and I think that they're going to try and bring that Legend of Boom back, and I think that this is exactly what Tyree Wilson will do and kind of set that demeanor for that defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're all great picks. Yeah. I just like the offensive line pick here, just because not only does it help Geno, but it also helps your run game. So it's one pick helps two parts of your play, and I just think that makes sense.
I think we all made great picks on that one. I think they could go either way, honestly.
And then like for me, and if my draft board doesn't work out the way that I think it does, and Bryce Young, it goes CJ Stroud, Bryce Young in any order at 1-2, or regardless if Bryce Young is not there, I don't think that they go Will Levis at number 5. So and I don't even think they maybe even go Anthony Richardson at number 5. I think that if Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are off the board, I really do think that they go probably defensive line. So I think that they've showed success on the offensive side. I think when we thought of Seattle, we thought of offense. I think that the O-line pick is solid, but it definitely came down to the defensive side of the ball. And like if we look at even the teams within their division with the 49ers, right? 49ers are going to run the ball on them. And they haven't, and they had a Seattle and the New York Jets arguably had the best draft, and I can't really decipher who necessarily had the best draft because I think
Eagles
Seattle
are up there too.
But if we look at Seattle, I think Seattle had 5 rookie starters who contributed in big ways. So Seattle's done a good job drafting, and I think that they may end up adding on the defensive side over an O-line position. Because I don't know. I think that their biggest need is a center on the O-line. And Nathan, the guy that you mentioned, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but Peter, I think that with him, he's an offensive tackle.
Oh yeah,
so I know that you can kind of shift around and make it work, but I think with their biggest need at center, I don't think that they go center there. I think that they're gonna. I think that they go more defensive side if Bryce Young is not there. But I'm saying Bryce Young is there.
And for our listeners, my pick was not to move him to center. It's to move him to keep him at tackle and protect Geno Smith's blind side.
So that concludes the top 5 for all of us. So just to run it back through, this is DJ. So I am going to list mine off. At number 1, I had Carolina picking CJ Stroud. At number 2, I had Houston picking Will Anderson. At number 3, I had the Arizona Cardinals picking Tyree Wilson. Number 4, the Indianapolis Colts selecting Anthony Richardson. And then number 5, Seattle picking Russell Wilson's backup or replacement, not backup, but replacement in Bryce Young.
Yeah, and with mine for Dalton, I have Carolina number 1 taking Bryce Young, Houston with number 2 taking CJ Stroud, Arizona with the number 3 pick taking Will Anderson, Indianapolis with the number 4 taking Anthony Richardson, and Seattle with the number 5 taking Tyree Wilson.
And old Big Nate over here has got number 1 Panthers selecting CJ Stroud. Number 2, Houston selecting Bryce Young. Number 3, Arizona Cardinals selecting Will Anderson. Indianapolis Colts at 4 selecting Anthony Richardson. And at 5, I had the Seahawks selecting Peter Skronsky, or however you pronounce it. And that includes our top 5 picks. But
Anyways, guys, thank y'all so much. That concludes our episode. I am the winner as always, and I expect to be winning the top 5 picks. I think that my draft options were the better options, and we will see how they pan out between the three of us. So as always, check out what we had to say. Try to keep track of what we discussed. We will be doing an after draft episode to see kind of how close we were. We will give percentages on how close we were and everything else. Maybe decide if there's a punishment. I don't know. We will see what we have to do. But anyways, thank y'all for listening. Follow us on social media. See comment on whichever guy you thought had the best overall draft picks for 1 through 5. Our next episode, we will be going over 6 through 10, and then going over the last bit of the draft, the last 20 picks of the draft, 20 or so picks of the draft right before the draft drops, and then we'll kind of see how we go. But anyways, as always, like I said before, thank you for the listen, guys, and follow us on social media. Do whatever you need to do to support us and help us start up this Uprising podcast. Let's go. Let's ride.
Talk to y'all later.
Yep. It was always a pleasure riding the pine with you boys. See y'all next week.